Caitlin Clark sat in the back seat of a sleek black SUV, watching the familiar Iowa landscape roll by in a blur. Her fingers drummed against her knee, a nervous habit she hadn't been able to shake since childhood. It had been years since she last set foot in West Des Moines, in the very gym where she first fell in love with basketball. And now she was coming back. The news of her return had been kept quiet, just how she wanted it. This wasn't a press tour, nor was it a homecoming parade. It was personal. A pilgrimage to see the man who had shaped her into the athlete she had become, Coach Ray Dawson. She exhaled deeply, glancing down at the small box in her lap. Inside was something that, to her, meant more than any championship ring or trophy. Her mind drifted back to the past, the first day she met Coach Ray, how he had seen something in her when others only saw a scrawny kid with big dreams. "You're gonna be something special, Caitlin. You just wait and see." His words echoed in her mind as the car pulled up to a small, one-story house nestled between two towering oak trees. The once vibrant basketball hoop in the driveway sagged slightly, its net frayed and discolored. The place looked different. Older. Worn down by time. She swallowed hard. This was it. The porch creaked beneath her sneakers as she walked up to the door. She hesitated, her hand hovering just inches from the wood. What was she even going to say? "Hey, Coach. Sorry I haven't visited in years. Sorry I didn't call more. Sorry I let life get in the way." She shook the thoughts away and knocked. No answer. She knocked again, a little harder this time. After what felt like an eternity, the door finally cracked open. Standing there was a woman in her mid-40s, her eyes tired, her smile thin. Caitlin recognized her immediately. "Mrs. Dawson," she breathed. The woman's eyes widened in shock. "Caitlin?" Caitlin nodded. "Yeah. I wanted to see Coach." "Is he?" Mrs. Dawson swallowed hard, then stepped aside. "Come in. He's been waiting for you." "Waiting?" The word sent a chill down Caitlin's spine. She stepped inside, and the moment she did, she could tell things were different. The air carried the scent of old books and coffee, but there was something else now, something sterile, something faintly medicinal. And then she saw him. Coach Ray was sitting in a recliner by the window, a blanket draped over his legs. His frame was thinner, his skin paler. But his eyes, those same sharp, knowing eyes, still held the fire she remembered. A slow, tired smile spread across his face. "Clark," he said, his voice weaker but still filled with warmth. The nickname made her throat tighten. "Coach," she whispered, stepping closer. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just looked at each other, as if trying to bridge the years of silence with a single glance. Then, finally, Coach Ray chuckled. "Would you look at you," he said, shaking his head. "The kid who used to throw. A fit every time she missed a free throw, now the best damn shooter in the country." Caitlin laughed softly, but something about the way he said it made her uneasy. There was a finality in his tone, as if he was saying goodbye before she even had the chance to say hello. They talked for hours. About the game. About the record she had broken. About how, even when the pain made it hard for him to sit up, he had watched every single one of her games. But as the conversation went on, Caitlin started noticing the signs. The way his hands trembled when he reached for his water. The way his breathing hitched when he spoke for too long. And then there was Mrs. Dawson sitting silently, watching them with an expression that said she had something to tell Caitlin, something she wasn't sure how to say. Finally, she took a deep breath and placed a gentle hand on Caitlin's arm. "He didn't want you to know," she said softly. Caitlin frowned. "Know what?" Mrs. Dawson's lips pressed into a thin line before she finally whispered, "The cancer, it's spread. The doctor said it won't be long now." The room went silent. Caitlin felt her entire world tilt beneath her. She turned to Coach Ray, but he was just smiling at her, calm, as if this was nothing more than another day, another game, another play to run. "Don't look at me like that, Clark," he murmured. "I didn't train you to cry over me." She clenched her jaw, fighting back the sting behind her eyes. "You should have told me." "And what would that have changed?" he asked. "You kept moving forward like you were supposed to. I wasn't about to slow you down." Caitlin swallowed hard and reached into her lap, opening the small wooden box she had brought. Inside was an old whistle, his whistle. The one he had given her the day she won her first junior championship. "Coach," she whispered, placing it in his trembling hand, "I wouldn't be who I am without you." A tear slipped down his cheek as he gripped it tightly. And I wouldn't be who I am without you, kid. The next afternoon, Caitlin rummaged through the old garage, her fingers tracing over forgotten tools, dusty storage bins, and a faded basketball wedged between stacks of cardboard boxes. She picked it up, squeezing it gently. It was slightly deflated, worn from years of use but still intact. Just like their bond. She found a pump nearby, filling the ball with air until it felt just right. Then she turned and made her way back inside. "Coach," she said with a playful smirk as she entered the living room, spinning the ball in her hands. "What do you say? One last game." Coach Ray chuckled from his chair, his voice weaker than before but still filled with mischief. "You challenging me, Clark? Only if you think you can keep up." He let out a raspy laugh. "You were always cocky." "You made me this way," she shot back, grinning. With Mrs. Dawson's help, Caitlin carefully wheeled him out to the backyard. The air was crisp, the sky a soft shade of blue, and a slight breeze rustled the trees, perfect basketball weather. The old hoop still hung from the tree, its net barely clinging on. It wasn't a stadium. There were no roaring crowds, no flashing lights. Just them. Caitlin dribbled the ball slowly, listening to its familiar rhythm against the pavement. "All right, coach. Let's see what you've got." She passed the ball to him and he caught it, though his hands shook slightly. He studied it for a moment, as if holding on to something more than just leather and air, memories, moments, pieces of a past he wasn't ready to let go of. Then, with all the strength he had, he pushed the ball toward her. It barely made it halfway before bouncing weakly. Caitlin scooped it up with a chuckle. "Gotta work on that pass, coach." He smiled, shaking his head. "I always told you, keep your hands ready. Never know when the ball's coming your way." She dribbled again, then took a shot. The ball arched high, spinning perfectly as it swished through the net. "Still got it," she teased. Coach Ray nodded approvingly. "Not bad. Not bad," she repeated, pretending to be offended. "That was textbook, coach. Could have used a little more backspin." She laughed, tossing the ball to him again. He caught it, held it close, then looked up at her. "You know, Clark," he said after a moment, his voice softer now. "This court, this game, it's not just about winning. Never was. It's about what you leave behind when you're done playing." Caitlin felt her throat tighten. "And what are you leaving behind, coach?" His eyes twinkled. "You." She didn't know how to respond to that. So she didn't. Instead, she dribbled once more, lifted the ball, and aimed for the basket. And this time, she made it for him. A few weeks later, Caitlin sat in a hotel room when her phone buzzed. She reached for it, not thinking much, probably just another media request, another game schedule update. But the moment she saw Mrs. Dawson's name on the screen, her heart dropped. Her fingers felt heavy as she swiped to answer. "Caitlin," Mrs. Dawson's voice was soft, strained. She didn't need to say it. Caitlin closed her eyes. He was gone. The silence stretched between them until finally Mrs. Dawson spoke again. He held onto the whistle. "Until the very end. He told me to remind you to keep shooting." A single tear rolled down Caitlin's cheek. She turned, staring at her duffel bag in the corner of the room. The whistle, Coach Ray's whistle, was still inside the small wooden box she had given him. She had given it to him. And now it was hers again. The next time Caitlin stepped onto the court, everything felt different. She had played in packed arenas. She had played under the brightest lights in the biggest games, with everything on the line. But tonight, as she stood at the free throw line, bouncing the ball against the hardwood, all she could think about was that backyard hoop, the wind rustling through the trees, and the sound of Coach Ray's voice telling her, "Follow through, Clark. You've got this." She took a breath. Then she shot. Swish. The crowd erupted, but she barely heard them. Because in that moment, she knew. Coach Ray was still with her. Not just in the memories, not just in the lessons he had taught her, but in every shot she took, in every game she played. He wasn't gone. Not really. Because legacy isn't measured in wins or losses, it's measured in the people you leave behind. And as long as Caitlin kept playing, his legacy would live on. Forever.